Good day. Welcome to this, the 10th weekly episode of the Frankly Speaking podcast. We touch on another heartbreak. A 4-year-old boy dies in his teacher's car outside his school. The paralysis in Jamaica shows in response to the noisy Yeng Yeng and the hooligan motorists who believe their horn is their power, and we take a look at the new minimum wage. All that plus a reminder of the post-war hardships for Jamaica, when the main source of fuel in the wattle and daub or board houses was kerosene, and it was scarce. But before all that, a quick review of the Sunday papers. Executive editor of the Sunday Observer, Vernon Davidson, gives us a blow-by-blow account of the travail of a Jamaican, William Messias, a businessman, his Ukrainian wife and their 5 children, leaving or trying to leave invaded Ukraine to the safety of neighboring Poland. Now, this is the stories featured on page 1. It's called Torture and Relief, giving the experience of Mr. Messias and his family and taking us into Poland itself, into the story, into Poland, but more Ukraine, and giving us a great sense, a front seat into this conflict in a faraway place. Now, the Observer doesn't stop there. Romario Lyons, named this year, by the way, as Reporter of the Year, goes into why so many Jamaicans study medicine in Ukraine, a question many have been asking. And that story, given 2 pages by the Observer, why Jamaicans choose Ukraine. The Observer also has 2 interesting farming stories, one of them showing us parliamentarians taking an interest in this vital but dirty hands story of farming. So the Gleaner leads with 150 listed, and it's a story by Jovan Johnson, who has been declared Journalist of the Year. Now, he writes, a member of parliament, at least 10 current and former permanent secretaries, and 10 senior local government officials are among more than 150 names that the Integrity Commission submitted to 2 financial institutions last year for key information. Now, it's a story with a lot of details. The Gleaner also sets out the winners of the Press Association of Jamaica Awards in 20 categories. And here are the awardees, a picture of Jovan Johnson again. 20 categories. Congratulations to all of them. The Gleaner also shows some interest in the Ukraine story with a piece by Janet Silvera of a Jamaican mother's anxiety and distress over her 2 boys in the country. Plus there is commentary by Orville Taylor, opinion journalism winner with Turner Thomas of Nationwide News, and also a piece by Dr. Alfred Dawes. The Gleaner sports section is particularly good this week with a lot on track. Now to Jamaican perspectives. So everyone knows Russia has invaded Ukraine, and tens of thousands of people, including at least 24 Jamaican students, have left the large European country as the Russians hammer it and the deaths pile up. People have been speculating about World War III, though a conflagration involving the great powers looks unlikely. Yet there may well be consequences for Jamaica. Author and former educator Elkanah Rule remembers how Jamaica, even 10 years after World War II, how Jamaicans lived and felt the mystery of the war years. Rule is a brilliant storyteller with 9 books, some of them used in our schools, that tell a sweet story about Jamaica. My favorite is Man from Jamaica Hills, That's just one of those 9 books he has written. So here he is, Elkanah Rule, remembering life as a boy a decade on in Jamaica from the last World War.
I was born in Wandibolas a year after World War II. As the events of the war dominated the conversation of the people in those rural areas. The war years were really difficult. There was a severe shortage of some of the critical items necessary for survival. Things like kerosene oil, salt, cloth to make clothes, and most importantly, money. Well, during those days, only few areas of Jamaica had electricity. There was absolutely none in the rural areas. So people depended on kerosene oil to provide light for their houses and to start their fire in the morning, among other things. People use coconut oil as a substitute.
Tell us a little bit about clothing, because you said cloth wasn't available easily.
Many of the people wore torn clothes. And all mothers had to be adept at mending, patching, and sewing. A particular piece of clothes will have many small patches all over. Shoes was almost non-existent, but spouses would buy a pair of shoes that the man could wear, the husband could wear, as well as the wife. It was a bit too big for the wife, and then it would probably be a little tight for the husband. Now, since weddings were like a whole day, the wife would go first in the morning wearing the shoes, and she knew that she should return by midday or shortly after midday so that the husband would get that pair of shoes to wear.
What was access to money like? Money?
Well, there was just no money. So, one wanted to build a house, and you could not purchase the items. So, what people did, they built houses completely out of straw and wood, without using even a single nail. So the roof was thatched, there was mud walls and dirt floors.
That's Elkanah Rule, author and retired educator. So back to Jamaica today. The death of a 4-year-old boy, Jordan Clark, in a car in which he was left apparently accidentally at his school last week in the capital city was another piece of heartbreak the country experienced again. Since the start of the year, we have heard at least one horrible story each week about the death or abuse of a child or of a woman that really is heartbreaking. It's only on January 20 that we learned of the death of the 18-month-old baby, Shalia Dobson, in her father's car at his workplace, a police station in St. Elizabeth. The police sergeant had gone to the Black River police station, parked his car, left the premises to work, and hours later remembered that he had not dropped the baby at daycare as he should have. Baby Shalia was pronounced dead at hospital. In this latest case of the 4-year-old at a basic school in Rollington Town, social media went wild. Some blaming the teacher who had given the boy a ride to school. Some tried and sentenced her. Others were simply rushing for the hangman's noose or the guillotine, whichever could teach the bloodiest lesson. Now to my commentary, frankly speaking. Frankly speaking, this week is a direct response to a viewer who said, And this is a paraphrase. Mr. McKnight, you have got to talk about the Yeng Yeng bikes and the guys in my district. Two of them were just riding the bikes at night, even at 2 in the morning, and caused it to make a sound like shots firing. Frankly speaking, noise is everywhere in Jamaica and nobody does anything about it. The matter of the bikes is a problem all over in upscale communities, in the inner city and rural districts. Noise, no help. People in communities disturbed by someone with a sound system or a set are even afraid to call the police when the music keeps going at 2 in the morning. Frankly speaking, the police won't act unless you call them and maybe call them and call them again. A relative of mine who lives away was distraught and more than taken aback on a recent visit by the indiscriminate use of horns by motorists of all types of vehicles at all times of day or night, in any place they felt, and in most cases the use was inappropriate or not prescribed by civil standards and of law. She, my relative, said it seems that all these people had not been able to get a fifi as a child, and now they had got one in their car in the form of a horn and felt the fascination and the power of a child over his fifi. Frankly speaking, if I have to tell you what is a fifi, it would ruin the rhythm of the narrative. There is no time for us to study why so many Jamaicans are just loud and noisy. We have a crisis. Every man and boy who acquires a motorcycle now believes he must adjust the muffler or remove its silencer so that it should make more noise and that it must simulate gunshot or bus. The newly favored Yeng Yeng has become the poster child for disturbing your neighbor or being offensive. But it is not all. Frankly speaking, in rural areas, some drivers of cars operating as taxis have changed their horns to using the ones made for trucks, and they use them liberally along the roadway. As I've said recently, many truck drivers are now a new nuisance to people, especially those who live in rural areas. Frankly speaking, they drive in an intimidator fashion and sit on their horns in winding roads with the intent to blow you off or tell you, get the hell out of the way, as they are coming through. Their use of the jake brake that you hear is awful and unnecessary. There is, frankly speaking, no thought about the people who are in their houses, maybe trying to sleep, or who are ill, or who just need and deserve some quiet for whatever reason. And then there are the other hooligans who keep sounding their horns if you don't move 1 second after the light changes or after the car in front of you inches forward. We were not always this way. We were not always a noisy or loud people, and we used to look down on the Americans for that. This noisiness is part of what is making Jamaica so unattractive, its communities so unpleasant. The central government has no structure to deal with law and order, and the parish councils are woefully inadequate in resources, political and administrative leadership, and lacking in any sense of what civilized, well-ordered communities may look like or feel like. So, who is to bell the cat? Now, the first episode of these Frankly Speaking podcasts on the last Sunday in 2021 called for an increase in the minimum wage because it had not moved in 3 years. I'm glad it's done. The new rate for household help, shop attendants, and so on is $9,000, up from $7,000 for a 40-hour work week. The increase won't take effect until April 1. There can be and are all sorts of arguments around it, including, and yes, it is true, that the real increase adjusted for inflation since the last rate is nearer to 10% rather than the 28% being trumpeted in some quarters. And yes, at today's exchange rate, it's only $57 a week. I'm also glad that, according to the president of the Household Helpers Association, many or most people who retain household help are already paying about twice the current rate. Desmond Richards will be back with us next week. And now, looking ahead. The kerfuffle over how the government responded to just over 40 Jamaican students in Ukraine will continue as we keep an eye on those trying to get home to Jamaica. And there's that developing story about the boy who died in the car outside the school, and the investigation into the earlier tragic incident of the 18-month-old in her father's car. And then at the weekend, there was that story of a soldier arrested in the death of a woman. And of course, anytime now we could hear about the developments into the investigation of the brutal murder of a 10-year-old boy in his mother's car in Montego Bay. Keep liking and sharing Frankly Speaking podcasts. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and let us have your comment, including on the issues you want us to take on. I'm Franklin McKnight. Until then.